This is a video podcast from the Canadian Centre for Architecture. The following is the first of 3 parts of the CCA's Urgency event, held for the first time in June 2007 with Rem Koolhaas and Peter Eisenman.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Mirko Zardini. I'm director of CCA, and I welcome you today to this conversation. We are in the tent where yesterday night CCA has the celebration of the 80th birthday of Phyllis with a gala. And today, I think it is a nice way to continue this celebration of Phyllis and of almost 20 years of CCA with a conversation. I would like to thank Rem Koolhaas and Peter Eisenman for being here. We are going to be very tight. There are some problems with the flight scheduled. Nevertheless, I think it is a nice opportunity to listen to them and to have then a conversation with Phyllis. The question that we asked them was very simple. What do you have on the table, and what do you think is important for you to tell today? Which is the urgency that you feel in respect to the contemporary situation of architecture or the world in which we live? So it was a very simple question. Perhaps the answer will be more difficult, and I'm sure that it will be very interesting. So welcome again, and I let Rem to start. Please join me. Welcome Rem and Peter.
Good morning. As Mirko said, he asked us what is urgent for you, and so I put together a number of slides that indicate a certain terrain about the current moment in architecture without any attempt to make a sophisticated argument, so it's urgent and blatant. What I want to basically focus on is the kind of status, and you could perhaps say the life and death of the icon, and what the death of the icon kind of now presents for us as architects. It is a death by overdose, but it is also perhaps a death through its connection to money. So, as a caricature, and I think that this morning maybe is the right place for caricatures. This used to be architecture for the past 3,000 years, dignified, civic, and public. Then the market economy happened. The market economy that kind of replaced almost all earlier values and erased ideology almost over the entire world. And therefore, this is what architecture is now. And what this represents is, for all of us, an obligation to be extravagant and spectacular. I already announced that they will not be subtle, so for that reason, we live in a very curious situation. This is Peter Eisenman, and this is the media, and this is a very serious work of architecture that kind of in this occasion forms the background for a kind of hunting scene, you could say. And what it kind of represents is that at this moment, I think that all architects share a very ambiguous status. We are not taken seriously, but we have unlimited amount of attention. And that kind of means that we can perform until we see blue in the face, and that it is not always clear whether we are engaged in intellectual discourse or kind of simple sales talk. We architects have let this kind of situation degenerate into an incredible free-for-all where we have not been able to save any dignity for the profession through our complete tactical inability to counteract these market pressures and on the contrary in our kind of willingness to be kind of utterly manipulated. I recently experienced a kind of drastic evidence of that situation in the context of a presentation of a headquarter building for Gazprom, the notorious energy company in Russia, where the usual gang was invited, where officially we were supposed to have a kind of presentation for the jury, but the presentation for the jury was cancelled at the last moment, and where all of us had to kind of perform like trained dogs in 5 minutes sections in a kind of linear exhibition space, and our only, let's say, our only response, and believe me, I tried to kind of change this and made the nth kind of futile attempt to try to connect this into a momentary or provisional collective that could refuse these humiliating conditions. No, we went all for it. This is Danny Libeskind on TV. This was his project. He has kind of recently worked for Hyundai. I think it looked like poodle redesigned by Brancusi. This is Pierre Demeron, the partner of Jacques, and he was presenting the scheme with the required seriousness. And what was kind of astonishing and for me really an appalling sign of how far we have let the situation between us deteriorate. In the next day after the presentations were over, Herzog and Dumeron added this panel to their exhibition in which presumably they kind of argued for a form of high-rise, but where below they had a kind of diagram that kind of maintained their tower intact, but that crossed out the entries of all the other competitors. Now, I'm rarely shocked, but this I found kind of really a shocking kind of low point, and that's, you know, simply in terms of what represents urgency for you, then this is urgency. This is a skyline of the kind of most worthy efforts of star architects in the last 10 years, including my own. And what it kind of represents for me is an inevitable crisis where the work we produce is no longer something mutually reinforcing, but I would say in its accumulation utterly counterproductive, and to the point where each new addition makes the sum kind of more negative. In addition, of course, we work for clients that are now typically described, and this is a typical sentence, architecture work with enthusiasm for tyrants and autocrats. So I would say that there is many problems. There's the problem of our work that kind of somehow is unable to find a way out of the current dilemma. And then there is many reasons to question the kind of sincerity and motives of us. But there is a third problem, and we now can shift provisionally to Dubai, where the people seem to have no kind of particular problem to actually inhabit the skyline that I showed here with kind of relative equanimity. But the third problem is that in Dubai there is a kind of parallel universe, and Dubai here stands for the rest of the world, or more precisely, Dubai stands for the non-Western world, Dubai stands for the world beyond America and Europe, of which we know so bitterly little. Basically, in Dubai, there are kind of extremely competent kind of offices that produce extremely competent architecture that is the spitting image of the architecture we star architects can produce. So not only is our work mutually cancelling, not only are our motives legitimately questioned, but there is also an increasingly kind of competent B-movie kind of architecture whose work is barely distinguishable from the work we do. This could be Foster, this could be Rogers, or this could be Calatrava, or blah, blah, blah. So not only do we have our own incredible skyline, we are followed very closely by a second incredible skyline of our colleagues, and I think the cumulative effect of these two givens together is inevitably the death of the icon, or the death partly through ridicule, partly through overdose, partly simply through a kind of perpetual hollowness. And of course the question is what to do in this situation. So what we are involved in the architecture world is a kind of titanic struggle on a kind of ridiculously kind of reduced battlefield, kind of leading to this kind of situation. Now, you almost think that there's something wrong with the whole notion of icon per se, and but when I look at a simple, nice little house by Ledoux, I don't see anything wrong with it, and I think it has a kind of very appealing harmlessness or almost innocence. And so I kind of simply wonder, why is this so innocent, and why is what we are currently doing so far from innocent? And I think that although the Chicago Tribune out of Laws is far from an innocent building, it is also a kind of powerful and confident assertion of the legitimacy of the icon, and is kind of in itself entirely believable. And even if you kind of suddenly look at it under the current conditions, both complex and simple, and in that effort quite strong. Now, what I don't really want to talk about our own work, but I kind of want to kind of simply show a number of kind of recent interventions in this Dubai world of the kind of parallel universe, almost outside the, let's say, conceptual attention of the Western world, and certainly outside the control. And a city which is on its way to turning into the justification of this Chinese artwork. Basically, the question was how to do a kind of major building on this site. There is a new dogma, kind of the most buildings kind of realized in the world today seem to be 300 meters tall and about 2.5 million square feet, or 2.5. There's a new increment that is kind of being realized almost at the expense of all other typologies, and we felt it was very important to make a new beginning and to start with a clean slate. So the building is a kind of huge slab of white concrete, kind of perforated with holes, with one three-dimensional extrusion, 200 by 300 meters and 21 meters wide. I'm not going to explain how the building works, because of course it has all our typical subtleties inside, but only talk about its external manifestation and how we intended it to be and act as a warning or as a new beginning in this kind of sea of typical conditions of the skyscraper today, shiny, intricate, expressive, and etc. So this was our contribution to that skyline, kind of simply trying to cancel a considerable part. And our only concession to the current status and expectation of extravagance was to develop with our engineers, this was the site, a way in which the building could turn. So that it's a very simple building, but it has one magnificent feature. Another kind of building equally in the same series is in a building also for the Middle East, one of the Emirates. I'm not kind of really explaining where. Part of a kind of city we're doing that also needed to be marked by architecture, and this is the mark we made, a different shape, unrelated to the shape of the skyscraper, and in that sense independent and kind of disconnecting itself from the typical condition. A third approach that we are currently testing, and I can give you the kind of announcement that our offices, after starting as OMA and adding AMO, we are now adding a new department to the office, which is called generics. In the same vein that kind of certain generic medicines perform in the same way as the highly copyrighted and patented original, we want to kind of start a department called generics that, and this is maybe a totally utopian effort that reverses this evolution that we've seen, and that kind of proposes to go back to a kind of utterly simple, reproducible, repeatable, and maybe even ultimately prefabricated kind of architecture. In other words, we want to reinvestigate a deep vein in modernist practice, where simply the generic is the domain of greatest solidity, perhaps. So here, you know, our generic, barely noticeable buildings in the same hyper density. The proliferation of icons kind of also kind of suggests perhaps a new strategy of the icon, not only different icons, but also a new strategy of the icon. So we have been looking very seriously in previous practices, and I think that perhaps the most exciting use of the icon in the past century has been the kind of project for Moscow in the 40s, where simply from an imaginary point in the center of the Kremlin, all of the entrances and the turrets of the Kremlin were projected outwards and increased in scale, so that apart from the real Kremlin, the Muscovite would be surrounded by a kind of virtual Kremlin of kind of larger skyscrapers. And I think that metaphor of a kind of virtual Kremlin, or the use of icons for the pursuit of a kind of coherent concept of the city, or a metaphorical concept of the city, remains perhaps a kind of feasible condition that we're testing in terms of distributing icons and kind of finding a relationship between generic, neutral and exceptional buildings in certain areas. The final kind of way in which I think one could perhaps deal with the notion of the icon, or one interesting for us experience has been to create icons completely outside the realm of architecture through AMO, and particularly with our effort to kind of revive and make more interesting the representation of Europe. This is the current European symbol. We proposed a kind of counter symbol based on a barcode where every nation was represented from west to east, and which, as the Europe extended, was infinitely flexible and could only get more rich as more bands were added to it. That was a notion that initially lingered in the bureaucracy of Europe, but that has recently kind of taken a fairly kind of major step forward. Not only with an exhibition on Europe that we organized on the very point in Vienna where Hitler signed the Anschluss, so on a kind of very highly political point, but where we were, on this very point, the tent, but where we were also responsible for the political mise en scène for a number of conferences where, among other people, also kind of George Bush performed. And so what I kind of simply want to say, it's too early perhaps to kind of throw the icon away. Maybe there are a number of ways in which it could either shed some of its more unpleasant associations of the current moment and current over-expectation to a return to basics, in contrast to and in complicitness with perhaps the generic as a kind of couple, that perhaps there could be iconic complexes or iconic triangulations that somehow define urban space in old/new way, and kind of finally that the icon as a kind of freestanding non-architectural kind of enterprise is of course alive and well and incredibly potent in our current visual culture, in which kind of architecture paradoxically, although in spite of its apparent apotheosis, is threatened with a kind of premature exhaustion. Thank you.